loads of room. Can't you see? There's no one here, only me. I'm driven mad from lane to lane. Need a place to park this pain. My number's up, I've had the call. A 60 to naught in no time at all. What we had is lost. This town will count the cost. A punch drunk from all the fights. Last one out, turn off the lights.
It's really weird. I know there's thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people who must have experienced the same thing. Not least the 5,000 or so fellow associates who are cut down with the same scythe as me. But you can't quite get your head around it till it happens to you. One day, you have a career you've spent 25 years developing, a future that's bright, not orange, a level of stability that has you mapping out your retirement. That's the trouble with us Cancerians, we do like stability. And the next, you're one of the unemployed, a statistic. And what a level of redundancy is, whether like me, you're a 38k a year manager or the guy that swept the track. Suddenly, we're in line together, ready to jump through the same demeaning hoops to get our job seekers allowance, ready to be spoken to by our undertrained and overworked advisors who are doing the best under the circumstances. It's not about that. I could witter on for ages about the disorientation that redundancy throws you into. I could deliberate all year about the hows and the whys of the MG Rover collapse, and I'll still come back to blaming Thatcher. Well, Thatcher and capitalism. Well, Thatcher, capitalism and the media. Well, Thatcher, capitalism, the media and the Phoenix Four. I guess I'd better stop before I spiral into the what have the Romans ever done for us sketch. It's not about the career or the job loss. It's not even about the physical place, the bricks and mortar of the factory. It's about not wanting to close a chapter of my biography that equates to over half of my life to date. I'm afraid that the characters in my life's novel may start to fade because of the beginning of a new phase of my life, a phase which I know will be tougher and have me running around like the proverbial blue-arsed fly. What's going to happen to the modern day folklore we generated down here? Stories from the Forge, before it closed altogether in the 80s, featured quite heavily during my apprenticeship. It was always one of the work placements that apprentices tried to avoid. Though once you'd been through it, you could honestly say that you had come of age and were considered a man. It was hot, dirty, and the ground shook under the imperial tonnage weight of the stamping forge hammers. It was these very hammers that ushered me into this world. I was born at home, June 23rd, 1964, at 44 Kyneton Road, Rubery, well within earshot of the pounding hammers. No sooner had I sucked in my first breath than the hammers said, "You'll be coming to work here, son." And they were right. I was practically branded at birth. The Austin, as it was known then, was the place to work, though it did drive some of its employees to their graves. You see, stories from the Forge were ghost stories, tales of old forge hammer operatives who had taken their own lives by sticking their heads under the forge hammers. Very dramatic and graphically chilling. It was quick, whichever way you look at it, the foreman would say, as he revelled in telling the work placement apprentices of the horrific decapitations. There was Bill in 68, Charlie in 74. Nah, Charlie was in 73. a passing colleague of the foreman would add, which must have been a meticulously choreographed interjection or some wicked ad-libbing. "Sorry mate, you're right," the foreman would continue. "Charlie was in 73, it was Colin in 74, then there was Bob and Teddy in 76. Well, it was a really hot summer that year. And of course Jim, only a couple of months ago, that was his hammer over there." And he would point to the forge hammer that was lying idle, as he probably had done for the past few years as part of the yarn. We cleaned it up after Jim had mashed his head under it, but it started, well, misbehaving. Yeah, right. The suppressed smirk would kind of give it away, though you'd always give that particular hammer a wide berth as you walked past it. Then there were the lockers that used to belong to the supposed unfortunates, and the spare overalls that had hung in them since their respective owners' tragedies. Us apprentices were never too sure whether these were just props to support the stories or actual historical artefacts. Some nights, the foreman would continue, you can still see Charlie going to that locker, taking off his gloves, hanging up his cow gown and going off to make his tea. He walked straight through me once. That was it. It pushed the boundaries of credibility too far, and nobody was going to believe anything about Charlie's or Colin's or Bob's. Mind you, you never did see an apprentice walk around on their own in the forge. There was another area of the factory that apprentices dared not venture into alone. The god-forsaken sewing shop. Before all the seat and upholstery manufacture was outsourced, the sewing shop used to reside by the South Engineering Block, not too far from the training school. There were no tales of severed heads or ghoulish goings-on. It wasn't inhabited by the ghosts of sewing machine operatives that had stitched themselves up into the rear seat of a Mini. That's the proper Alec Izigonis Mini, not that BMW Pretender. No, the sewing shop was a place of something far worse. Middle-aged, sex-starved women. Now, whilst most men would find that a positively heaven-on-earth scenario, it scared the living bejesus out of us 17-year-old young bucks, as we were often referred to as in the sewing shop. Cries of, "Come over here, love, and I'll show you what experience can do for you," and "Pop it in quick, love, while nobody's looking. I can suck a golf ball through a 20-foot length of garden hose, me," was sometimes accompanied by a flash of flesh that could make some of the most hardened apprentices blush. No pun intended. Of course, all work and no play could make an apprentice a dull person, so we periodically organised our own days out. There was that time when a group of us went to Alton Towers in 81 and smuggled haggis in by hiding him in the boot of Gary Spiller's Allegro. I think Alton Towers took steps after that to make sure that that kind of defrauding behaviour didn't happen again. The memory still sits there in my brain bank, like one of those supermarket thermal paper receipts that fades over time due to the effects of ambient heat. When I close my eyes, it gets increasingly more difficult to see our faces back then. Gaz Spiller, Carl Thompson, Johnny Mack and Haggis with hair. And me, of course. I can't even remember the rides we went on. I guess the corkscrew must have been one of them. Though, now I think about it, I'm sure Gaz Spiller and I sat next to each other on that very ride and groaned simultaneously as the G-force got us at the bottom of the first dip. Actually, now I do think about it, apart from the very occasional boisterous acts that you'd expect from 17 and 18-year-old lads, you know, seeing who could piss the highest against the wall or fart loudest and longest without following through, most of the day was spent chilling out in the Oriental-themed gardens, chatting about life and enjoying each other's company. Not even one spliff between us either. The interesting part of the whole haggis smuggling escapade was trying to get him out of the boot without being spotted by the stewards. We did laugh. Now, while some people may be thinking, no wonder the place went down the pan, those of us that were at Rover or the Austin for any period of time will be saying, no wonder the place lasted so long. We were one big multiracial and multicultural family that was being progressively culled by outside intervention. Well, the culling's complete now, and I, like thousands of other ex-Rover employees, are staring into an uncertain future, just like billions of people across the world do each day. Why should we be any different? The trouble is, a lot of us are different. We've been institutionalised. We haven't known anything else but Rover. We're like an animal born and raised in captivity and suddenly been released into the wild. I can't really complain though. It's not as if we've been hit by Hurricane Katrina or a tsunami or anything like that. There will be life after Rover, and we'll all have our own apprentice day trips, forge, sewing shop folklore to recite to anyone who'll listen and keep the memories alive. And who knows, one day we might be all looking back and saying, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. It's still really weird though.